Hello, my name's Adam Ferry. I'm an occupational therapist and one of the directors of the Occupational Therapy Service. This short video looks to explore how we design spaces that support someone to be independent and relatively risk-free with a visual impairment. A visual impairment is something that might have historically been described as partially blind, but visual impairment is the term that we're using. The first thing to note is that someone with a visual impairment will often know themselves what they want or need. Our job, as I see it, is to educate that person to what's available to meet the need that they've identified or the goals that they've identified. Some of the things that we need to educate people on are things such as task lighting. Now, task lighting is incredibly important. It's the concept of lighting an area, a specific space within the environment where the person functions. You can probably see that from this video, where the downlighting focuses on an area rather than a large ceiling light just illuminating the whole space more generally. The idea of that is it supports visual acuity, with the theory that if you reduce the distance between the light and the object by half, you triple visual acuity. So you're making things sharper and more visually accessible to the person. One of the other important concepts is colour contrast. Now, colour contrast is the idea of creating, quite simply, the contrast between different surfaces or different objects. What we really need to be looking at in these spaces is those two colours having a different light reflective value of greater than 30. And sometimes colours will have a light reflective value clearly identified on them if someone's, say, decorating that space. But AKW have an LRV guide on their website which gives you an indication of where the different spectrums are within light reflective value. It's incredibly important. So light reflective value and colour contrast are two of the key concepts. The others would be support normal routine. So don't come into a space like a bathroom and make suggestions on changing a layout completely until you've been able to assess and determine how the person uses that space in their own home and in their own routines. Making too many dramatic changes confuses the person from a visual perspective. And declutter. So try and ensure that spaces aren't cluttered, they are free of objects. It helps to completely mark out the specific spaces when you're using lighting and colour contrast. If there's clutter, it confuses visually that person often. So there's some of the key concepts. To know more about those in more depth, there's a clinical guide written for occupational therapists and anybody else who might find that interesting on the AKW website, as long as other guides that focus much more specifically and in much more detail on some of the concepts such as light reflective value, colour contrast and task lighting. We've previously referenced the importance of task lighting. Now, this space and this lighting is a great example of what can be achieved. At the minute, the room is lit with a full standard ceiling light. However, when we light the task, we can see how different that then looks. The space is lit well, visual acuity increases, and it should be much more accessible to someone with a visual impairment. These spotlights can be 600 to 800 lumens depending on the size of the space, and I'd refer you back to the visual impairment guide that we've written for healthcare professionals to see what lumens should be used within certain spaces. And these are 30 centimetres away from the wall as a standard. AKW have a visual impairment light pack and a guide that refers you much more specifically and in much more detail to how spaces should be covered, but hopefully this is a really good visual representation of what we're talking about when we refer to task lighting. We've already referred to one of the key concepts being colour contrast, and this space is a great example of what we mean. Now, in this space, particular colours have been chosen to create the aesthetic. In someone's home environment, those colours be whatever fit within what they like or dislike, but it creates the concept. So here we've got some white fixtures and fittings, We've got the grey grab rails and other fixtures here which have a greater than 30 light reflective value between the colours on the walls and the floor. And the floor and the wall, you can see, are very well colour contrasted. On the AKW website, the guide would tell you what light reflective value each of these colours have to enable you to create recommendations that maximise the contrast between those colours. But it doesn't have to be clinical. It could completely match with what the aesthetic that the client you're working with wants, but it's important that the concept itself of light reflective value is installed. When designing a shower space for someone with a visual impairment, it's very important that you understand what's on the market to support that person to be independent and safe. Now, a lot of that will come from your activity analysis and working out with them what they can see and what they need. Like we've already talked about, the person with the visual impairment is very likely to understand what they need, and it's up to us to match that with what is on the market. So something like the eye therm, it might be that the person can see the two dials but can't necessarily see which is for temperature and which is for flow. Now, of course, they would learn that over time. They would learn that one is for which and one is for the other, and it's a very simple power on-off. However, it doesn't have any raised buttons or raised instructions or guides on it if the person needs that tactile feedback depending on the level of their visual impairment. So something like the Smart Care lever does. So the on-off has a raised button that you can feel. That's definitely power. It has a power symbol which I can feel. It has the cold, it has a raised C, and it has a raised H, as well as dots for someone to be able to feel which is hot and which is cold. So a number of different options on this shower for somebody who has a visual impairment, maybe a more severe visual impairment than somebody who may use and benefit from the eye therm. And taking that to the next step, you've got the Smart Care Plus, a lot more raised buttons and features on that, very tactile. I can very clearly feel that that's a plus and a minus, and I can feel that that is a T for temperature and an F for flow. So again, somebody who requires a very much tactile feedback, or for somebody who has very, very limited or no sight or vision, the Smart Care Plus might be the one you go for. The Smart Care Plus has the added bonus that it has controls that either the person or the carer can use, which has the same raised button features. So understand the marketplace, understand what AKW can offer. You're the expert in occupational therapy and in the application of activity analysis. What you now need to understand is what's here and available through AKW to help meet our clients' needs.